Good morning. I'm Carlyn Madden. I'm the founder and CEO of Good Insight, an executive search firm and governance consultancy serving the social sector. You've joined us today for a conversation about board giving. We're going to talk about building a culture of philanthropy, helping boards set goals, helping them hold themselves accountable, some creative ways that we can encourage fundraising this fall. I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Tracy Shaw, a principal at Thread Strategies, one of our local fundraising consulting firms. And we forgot to record this introduction, so I thought we'd just pop on for just a second to introduce Tracy and I and set context for our conversation. So as founder and CEO of Good Insight, I work with clients on designing leadership transitions, recruiting senior executives, and working with boards on a whole host of board development projects, whether that's supporting a board retreat, training like on board giving, or helping design strategies, board recruitment strategies, setting new policies, things like that in place. I've got about 15 years as a nonprofit recruiter and governance expert and philanthropy professional. So I come to this nonprofit work through grant making, and I've seen hundreds of nonprofits, how they're doing things good, bad, and otherwise. I'm specifically interested in helping support small, mid-sized nonprofits, recognizing that not everything works exactly as it should in a small, mid-sized nonprofit, and we need to make sure that things are customized so that you have the resources that you need. Tracy's going to join us in just a second when we segue over to the recording. And she's the principal of Thread Strategies, or a principal of Thread Strategies, which works with clients on board assessments, development plans, and a whole host of support for frontline fundraising as her clients build their own capacity. She's got 20 years at local and regional, national nonprofits, and has a lot of board service herself. She's the vice chair of a great organization, Live It, Learn It, that provides experiential learning to kids in Title I schools here in DC. We hope you enjoy this conversation. It's helpful for you. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to drop Tracy or I a line after you take a watch. Thanks. Fantastic. Okay, so Tracy and I had a chance to chat before this as well, though, and we did want to also say that the stuff that we're going to talk about is sort of the things that you read about in the books, right? Like if you have board source books, I'm a board source certified consultant, this is the information that we've been given. That doesn't work for every single organization. And there are going to be shades of this that will work for your organization and then shades that don't work for your organization, particularly if you're an organization whose board members actually come from a community, a low-income community that you're serving. And so we want to make sure that what we're saying is it's a promising practice for a lot of organizations, but it's not the constitution of nonprofits. So take what we say with a grain of salt, figure out how you can modify it to work with you. And if you're having a really community-centric governance process, that may or may not work with you. What is it about creating a new culture, not necessarily doing all the things on the checklist? Tracy, I don't know if you want to expand on that in any way.
Absolutely. And it's important, especially at this moment in our world and society, that you root all of your practices as an organization, as a board member, with diversity and an equity lens. And a lot of times, some of these best practices, or especially as we talk about give-get policies, can sometimes tend to be exclusionary. So we just want to be really cautious as we talk about the need for those things, but also really root your conversations around creating these practices and policies and culture within your organization with that lens in mind, and be very, very thoughtful about it as you are talking with these key volunteers and working with them in your organization.
And some of you all might, I'm going to drop just a link into the chat. Some of you all might be familiar with community-centric fundraising practices. It's a new methodology that's coming to light around how to make fundraising more equitable. And so Vu Lee, who's a nonprofit thought leader. Sorry, Steve, I sent that to you privately. I'm going to send it to everybody just in a second. Vu Lee, who's a nonprofit thought leader, is doing a lot of work around this, and really appreciate all of his thoughts there.
Absolutely.
Okay, so digging in, the first question is about give-get policies, Tracy, and I know you have a lot of experience with give-get policies. Can you talk a little bit more about when the time is for an organization to start a give get policy, and what should that give get policy include?
Absolutely. So if you don't have some sort of governing policy around participation in giving or building resources, then now is the time to have a conversation, to start the work towards instituting or at least codifying what that means, what it means in your organization, in your board, to participate in helping raise the resources that it takes your organization to run annually, and enact your mission. So now's the time if you don't have one. That's what I would say. And then it's always been important for us as we have these conversations with executive directors and board chairs. We ask them to think about the conversation that should happen between board chair or development committee chair or even executive director with each individual board member, that each year when they talk about their goals as serving on your board. And one of those goals should be, what is it that I'm contributing, whether that's a monetary gift or networking to raise resources. So if you think about what that conversation might look like, that will lead you to a really good document. Conversation around goals, personal goals, talking about the impact of the mission as it relates to what that board member as a volunteer cares about your organization. And in the end, that piece of paper and that give get policy should really lead you to a really successful conversation. It should have elements as like, these are my goals and this is how I'm going to accomplish those goals throughout the year. But overall, that idea, it also helps build the culture of philanthropy in your organization. So I do believe it should be codified and written down as like, this is, as a board and as an organization, we believe that board members should participate in helping raise the resources that our organization needs to deliver our mission and vision in the world. So, and what that means for your organization might look a little bit different. A lot of times we say, it's important to think about importance and goal and priority. If you're a board member, one of your priorities in your philanthropy should be to give or help build the work of the organization that you're serving on. So that's another way to think about it in the policy. Our board members prioritize giving and helping us because they serve on our board. So those are some elements I think that are important of the policy. But again, putting it in the context of, is this equitable? And are we really thinking about it as a whole? Like we, as a whole, as a board, we are supporting we believe in supporting the organization. What that looks like for each individual is different.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, Tracy. I know both you and I believe it's not about creating a specific, it does not have to be a specific number. It doesn't have to be our contribution is $5,000, period. Because some people can give over $5,000. So you're underestimating their potential. And then some people can't quite make it to $5,000, and maybe significantly less than $5,000, but the contributions that they make, the perspectives that they have are absolutely valuable to the organization. And so having an individual conversation with each person and creating an average or a total goal, right? So we want board giving to be 10% of our income each year, 10% of our individual giving each year. Trying to create something that is feasible, but also respects people at different levels is absolutely okay. Now, if you're an organization that's been really successful just saying and recruiting people by saying it's $10,000, that's it, we're recruiting people that can give us $10,000, that's also absolutely okay. It just matters for you all to think what is that culture for your organization. The reason to do it sooner rather than later is for you to be able to talk to the people that you're recruiting and saying what the expectation is. What you don't want to do, if you feel like it's already, you don't have a strong culture of board giving, or it's already a little confusing, you don't want to continue that by inviting new people into your confusion. You want to make sure that it's clear, that people know what they have to give. What we often say is that we want people to give among their top 3 gifts. So maybe they're giving to a university, a church, and this organization, or this organization, another organization, and another organization that they sit on the board. So thinking really about what's that top 3 gift look like helps people to think, okay, I'm not giving this the 3rd highest. So what can I do to be moving toward that? Tracy, you and I like thinking about how do you figure out those numbers for an organization? If you're working with an organization, what's the process you use to create
Yeah, that's such a good question. We've actually literally had a conversation as a leadership team yesterday via email and GChat about, that advice. We always want to make sure that we're helping our organizations that we work with move towards what's best for them. That's first. Well, I would love to start there. When we are working with partners and clients, it's really about what is meaningful to that organization in that moment. What does their annual cash raised revenue from individuals look like? What does it look like over the last 3 years? So that's very important to know your data, what it means to your organization. But I think, and Carlyn had mentioned this, and as we were talking previously, it's also okay to reach out to some of your peer organizations to say, what is it that your board members give? What's the total that they give? What does that mean to you? What feels comfortable and right to you? I also think we have seen boards come together in specific inflection points of organizational history, whether that be a growth campaign or an anniversary event. Boards make a concerted effort to set a goal for that specific fundraising campaign and get to that as a board. And they have thoughtful conversations about what that means, how much they think they can give as a board or raise as a board. So it's important to think about, are you thinking about the entire number? Are you thinking about a very specific type of campaign? But the important thing is have the conversation and talk about it amongst the board members as well as the leadership team at the organization. That's what I would say.
So Tracy, we have some board members that are on this and we also have some executive directors. Whose responsibility do you think it is to have these conversations?
That's a really good question. So in the end,
I already know Tracy's answer.
It is my philosophy and our philosophy that it's the board's responsibility. It's the board chair, specifically as the leader of that peer group, to have these conversations with one another. And so that's the executive director can help. I would say put up the structure that can help lead these board members to have good conversations. But in the end, it's the board's responsibility in board development, board cultivation, and have that conversation to hold each other accountable, but also make those plans and discuss it with the executive director. But again, so the board chair plays a critical role, or perhaps your development committee chair, but those conversations should happen between board members themselves.
And so reinforcing that it's peer to peer.
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking about, you're going to ask board members to reach out to their peers as well. And so can we create better peer-to-peer relationships when it comes to board giving, so that my fellow executive directors on the call, they can focus on other elements, the annual funds, program funding, institutional fundraising, but the board members have an agreement, we'll work on ourselves. We will address this. And that the executive director does not need to be chasing down people. They feed information to the board chair, to the development committee about how many gifts received, where the progress is, but they don't have to be knocking on the door to say, you haven't given the gift that's going to pay for my salary, or the receptionist salary. That is important information. That's a peer conversation. We must hold our peers accountable that are going on the board, are going to be on the board. And any board members that are actively doing that, feel free to drop in examples of what that looks like in the chat. For you all, the one shame of us not being able to get together in person and doing this at my office at WeWork is that we don't get to have rich relationships. But if you have an example of how that's worked well in your organization, feel free to drop it into the chat, and feel free to follow up with one another as well. Another piece of that board relationship, what was I going to say? Board chair, executive director. We'll move on. I'll think of it later. Another question is enforcing. Well, we talked about enforcing payment. So you had some good thoughts earlier this morning about enforcing payments and how you can appropriately shake down people, or maybe even not.
So I have a couple points that I wanted to, as I thought about this conversation. So first of all, it's really important for board members as well as organizational staff to make sure that they conceptualize board members as volunteers. They ultimately are lead volunteers and key volunteers that do have fiduciary expectations and responsibilities, but they should be managed as high-level volunteers and major givers. They should be stewarded and cultivated the same. So if you're an executive director sitting in a place of what in the world, think about them as major givers, start that cultivation and stewardship relationship building process. But in the end, you have reached the voicemail box So you can only do so much to help to hold them accountable. Again, it should happen at that board level. So that's one thing. The second thing I want to make sure is that you are honest in your own expectations of these lead volunteers, and that if there is a moment that comes that you have done all you can as either the board chair and or the executive director in your roles, bless and release those that aren't coming along with you. You can do everything, you can bring it, lead a horse to water, those kinds of cliches, but there's no reason for you to spend or waste precious energy in this moment in the world on perhaps a board member who just believes that they give what they give in other ways. So it's okay to say that's great, because if you see yourself as kind of like the policer or the monitor of those gifts, it creates a transactional type relationship with your volunteers, and you want to make sure that that relationship continues to be fruitful in a genuine and sincere way. So it's really important that you set the right expectations, but also envision that relationship and build it as a genuine steward and cultivating for this legacy and lifetime supporter of your organization. So those were the things that came to mind when I thought about accountability, or holding each other accountability, but making sure that board members are participating. Mm-hmm. Another thing is term limits. That's why term limits are great. That's another part of developing your board. As the board members come to the end of their service, it's okay to bless and release them and let them serve other places.
Yeah, I think that's so important, just to say out loud to a group of executive directors, right? You're going to spend a lot of time feeling like, oh, that one board member, it's that one board member that never makes their gift. It's that. Think about all the time that you spend stressing about that. You can find another donor. You can have coffee with a different person that's going to give you even more money. That don't let that become a toxic situation for yourself, and think about all of the other conversations that you could have with people that are going to be even a longer legacy donor, whether that person be on the board or not. The other thing that is important, that when I'm working with my clients, thinking about how do you structure a board agreement that specifically outlines what those fundraising responsibilities are going to be. And so for, the normal board agreement that says I'll attend 100% of meetings, stop with that 80% of meetings, just like, don't set a goal that's lower than 100%. Like, we can talk about that later. When we're setting all the things that we're going to expect from board members, and then also what board members can expect from our organization. There's a section that's going to be about fundraising, and very specifically saying, this is how much money I choose to donate to the organization. These are the different vehicles that I'm going to choose to donate. So maybe I'm going to make a personal gift of $1,000. My company will make a gift of $1,000. And then the next line is over what period of time, so that then you can say what you're going to expect. Are you going to make a donation in July, December? Are you going to make monthly payments of $250? Are you going to give a $10,000 grant as a match for the annual fund? Be very specific about what that ends up looking like for your, let people be specific about that. How they cannot be specific if you're just emailing that document to them, and there's no opportunity for a board chair, a governance chair, to walk through what the different options are and know what other people are doing. People are just going to respond to say, okay, what's the easiest thing that I can do? But if you sit down and have a 1-hour conversation about the organization, its direction, get some feedback about what they'd like to see, what they'd like to change, what board meetings would look like, in the perfect world for them, then you can start having a conversation about what are the different fundraising things going to be. We talked about that peer-to-peer before. So very specifically in your board agreement, allowing for people to indicate, oh, I'm going to host a party. I'm going to do, my kids are going to do a car wash. What are the different things? And then as an executive director, you can be tracking that and making sure that those things happen and that when that money is going to come in. The other thing that is helpful is, and I talked to a lot of folks, they're like, but none of our money comes in until the very end of the year, and we have a calendar fiscal year. So it looks like we're raising no individual giving throughout the year, and then it hits at the end of the year. It happens a lot. Can you have a conversation with your board members and get that gift in March or July do your board members really care? Is this a make or break for them? Some it may be, others it's definitely not. And so can you be teasing them throughout the year, teeing up those gifts throughout the year so that you are preparing your financials to look at the whole big picture for individual giving. It's just a simple conversation. And I've had a lot of clients that felt like that worked out really well for them.
Carlyn, we have a couple questions here. Tom's wondering if you can share an example agreement.
Yeah, Tom, I can definitely share one. I'm happy to, basically, I'll figure out how to post it online and send everybody to a link for it.
And then Mary is interested in hearing about board stewardship in practice and what works or is not burdensome for both sides.
Yeah, so do you have some examples, Tracy, of how board stewardship?
So yeah, absolutely. I would just say, think about stewardship as relationship building. What are the key ways in which you build other relationships in your lives? There is an element of some, and I know that in the caveat of in our current world reality that we cannot meet in person, but I believe that it's really important that you create the space for board members to see and talk to each other face to face outside of board duty or board responsibility, if that makes sense. There should be a way to socially gather, to get to know one another, to build relationships at that level. And that's part of stewardship. Are you creating the environment in order for board members to feel connected to one another so that they care about their peer on the board? So that's one way. Another way is really individual conversations that are meaningful, that are like calling up, I just want to check in with you. How have you been? You gave some great comments on the board. I wanted to thank you for that support. That can come from board chair. It can also come from executive director. So there's levels at which these relationships are being developed and stewarded. As a board member myself, I've been able to sit on kind of both sides. I love having conversations, just, coffee. We had a virtual coffee with the executive director over the last couple of weeks, and that was just so much fun to check in with her and see how things were going. But also, as the vice chair, myself and the board chair are also having similar conversations and going through, like, tell me about how you feel about your service right now. What are some things that are going on in your world? What can we do to help? Is there ways in which we can connect or network? I think, honestly, it's just about identifying key ways to build relationship and steward. And then if and as board members are giving, they should absolutely go into your regular stewardship plan as a donor. If you have a board member that is a major giver, you would absolutely do the exact same things that you are doing for major givers currently, or in that moves management process of your organization and your giving program. So those are some quick, I think, and easy wins to create that space for relationships to bloom and grow.
Yeah, I think those are all great points, Tracy. The other thing, this is not promotional, like try not to be promotional by any means. How often are you offering board retreats? Are you actually doing fundraising training? Board members don't reach out to their own network. So like, yes, we're talking about like stewardship within the board, but then we're going to shift and we're going to talk about boards reaching out to their own networks because they don't know how to talk about the organization in a fundraising way, right? They're like, oh, I don't want to ask for money. We have been acculturated to not talk about money. Don't talk about money in any aspect of your life. And so how are we expecting people that don't have that as a professional piece to be able to talk to networks about money? So using opportunities for a board retreat, a fundraising training for people to get to know one another on a deeper level, and a stewardship ability. They're also, so that's a piece. So if you're not doing at least an annual fundraising or an annual or every other year, so that each person has an opportunity to learn how to build a case among their network, what is going to resonate among their network about the particular organization, and be able to talk about with passion the mission of your organization in a way that also preserves the community. I sometimes see board members that will be like, I'm on this great organization. We reach underprivileged kids in the poorest, and it's just like, oh, we don't talk about our community like that. You need to make sure that the board has opportunities to learn how to talk about the community, and you can course correct if things are not true to the values of the organization. So leaving opportunities for that, for people to get together, talk about the organization. The other is, what percentage of your board meeting is dedicated to talking about fundraising? And I'm not talking about a report out from the development director of like, here's our goal, here's how far we are, we hope we can reach it. I'm talking about shifting things to a consent agenda. Some of my clients are on the call, they're like, this consent agenda stuff, but shifting things into a consent agenda and leaving time to talk about big fundraising ideas. Maybe a success story from Jim about landing what it was like to attend a site visit, and that he was nervous going in, but actually he was able to add a whole new perspective and really now understands what fundraising looks like. Or a recent party co-hosted by 2 board members that actually didn't know each other really well, but they had similar demographic folks that wanted to come or that came to this party. It was really interesting to see what networks came out of that. Or even thinking about some larger conversations about fundraising trends that are happening, all of the money that's gone into World Central Kitchen and how World Central Kitchen has been able to grow its organization, and reading maybe an article about it from the Chronicle of Philanthropy. How are you seeding these conversations and helping people connect the dots? Once people start talking about their contributions, other people will be like, oh, I haven't done anything. Let me follow up with the board chair, the development committee, to talk about what ways I can get engaged. So leaving some space in those board meetings is a really important piece of it as well.
And I would say oftentimes, I would say probably 90% of our clients and partners, when they have a development committee, they are either looking ways in which to focus those volunteers and board members on strategic fundraising conversations, and kind of get them out of the weeds. So that is one way in which your development committee and those members who want to serve as development committee members on their board can really help keep your board at a strategic level, at a governing level, versus crossing over into that operational, muddying the waters a little bit. Your development committee chair should be the ones perhaps pulling those articles down off of Chronicle of Philanthropy, talking about big picture, talking about sister-like organizations, what they saw them doing, or making the calls to their fellow board members. Can you be prepared to share with us that information from that fundraising event that you went to, or so on and so forth. So it keeps those committee members focused on the high-level strategic conversations to engage and educate board members at board meetings.
Yeah, Mary, I'm reading your follow-on to make sure that we are addressing it. So like the artifice of calls, I've talked about other things. Some of the folks have been on other sessions where we talk about like onboarding and sort of like board buddies. The people that want to make the calls, have them make the calls. Train the people that are like the people that are just like, I hate phone calls. Like, so the people that love phone calls and love that opportunity to get to know, train those as your frontline connectors and people that can build bridges. It does not have to be every single person stretching themselves in uncomfortable ways and feeling like, another phone call, what have you. Have the most friendly people be the board buddies. Have the most friendly people, even if it's 2 or 3 people, just to be those networkers. And they love that. That's where they get their energy from. They're able to talk about that other opportunity to pull somebody in. It does not have to be the board chair. It does not have to be a governance chair. It just has to be somebody that's able to bring back the information and share what they've learned. So thinking about who that is in your organization and if they'd be willing to be tapped to be that like friendly greeter type person and bringing back the information that they're finding.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody is so individual. Everybody has something to give. They wouldn't have come to the board or gone through the process of coming onto the board if they didn't feel like they had something to give of themselves. And so that's really important that you're not square peg. You're not trying to find the same board member over and over and replicate that same board member. You need a variety and diversity of folks. And so finding and figuring out their strengths through these conversations and really playing up what they feel like they have to offer, what they want to accomplish, and then offering them the opportunity to do that in their way, I think is really, really important. That you're not looking to do, everybody doesn't have to do the same thing to be successful when it comes to fundraising.
Yeah, it could be small groups too. Like to Mary's point, people are busy. It's hard to find the time.
Sure.
So, it's certainly one-on-ones. It takes up more time. Sometimes it's hard to schedule groups of 2 or 3, but scheduling groups of 2 or 3 and being specific. It's not just like, hey, I'm just seeing how your family's doing. And then like, oh, by the way, do you want to talk about giving money to this organization? be specific. We want to talk about really specifically about creating our culture of board giving. We're looking at doing X, Y, and Z, and we want to get your feedback about it. And make it a 30-minute call, make it a 15 or 20-minute call. It does not have to be a long get to know you. My dog is really like doing all the things over here. So for the folks, fellow dog friends in the room here. So thinking about what that looks like for your organization and how do you leverage the amount of time that you have to do it. And brief is fine. People are really busy.
And we also have Lori's wondering about tracking board volunteer hours and figuring out how to value those in situations where board members may be temporarily unable to contribute financially. And so how does that conversation go between the board chair and those members?
Yeah, Tracy, do you have immediate thoughts?
I would just go back to what we said to begin with. I'd be very cautious of creating transactional relationships with the members of your board. I think it's important, you can estimate and track hours, but the more you can over systematize it so that people feel like you are literally tracking them and checking boxes, and that doesn't feel good as a volunteer. It's really important to balance. We have this many meetings a year. We assume that you're going to spend 3 to 4 hours a month. We're grateful for that. I would hesitate to put a value at a board member a dollar value on a board member's hours spent and equate that with their contribution, their monetary contribution or their networking. I think it's important to root those policies in. This is what we hope, this is what we expect our board members to give in these ways, and have an individual conversation with that. So that's kind of where I would land on that. Yeah, I don't know, Carlyn, if you would.
So I think releasing us from the idea of equality, right? So not everything has to be absolutely 100% equal. And I think, and particularly for my fellow white folks on the call, like that's where we go, right? Like we're like, let's make sure that everybody's doing at least the same amount. People contribute things at different values. And so somebody's monetary donation might be a greater value than somebody else's because it's particularly for general operating support versus a program. Somebody's time spent helping develop out a strategy might be, the executive director ended up having spent a lot of time helping and shaping that conversation, whereas like getting the data into the donor database was like really an incredibly high value amount of time spent. So I think releasing, just being able to release ourselves from the idea of equality and really thinking about what's equitable. And people are going to be able to contribute things at different levels, and all of that is fine. And we're going to embrace all of that and not worry too much about sort of the big brother tracking piece. What is helpful if people cannot, what is helpful in terms of, I think, a dashboard is thinking about things in averages and medians, or like specific examples of how somebody contributed something that was really helpful. Sally was able to help us clean up our donor database this month. And it was just one of really like just send our sincere appreciations. Our staff would have had to spend hours doing that. Sally was able to do that, took some time out and do it. Maybe Sally has been furloughed, so Sally has a little bit of extra time. We don't have to say, and Sally is doing that in lieu of her $1,000 donation. We just send the appreciation for Sally for being able to spend the time. When the rub sometimes comes when we're going to ask people to go out and ask their networks to make donations, and maybe they have not given a donation themselves. It is uncomfortable to ask somebody to make a donation when you have not made a donation yourself. So even if you're making a $200 donation and you've divided that over a given month, you can tell somebody, I'd love for you to join me as a monthly donor. Now, we're accepting donations from $20 to up to $250 a month. And I'd love if you joined me as a monthly donor. You don't have to be like, and I give $10 a month. You just say, I'd love for you to join me as a monthly donor. And then, somebody receives that and says, that's wonderful. I'd love to join you as a monthly donor. Send me more information. I can then, do that and then also celebrate my other philanthropic gifts. You can also, thinking about people that are coming at different levels, again, that's where the average comes in. More people are going to give more based on their ability to give more. And then that's just okay. Board members, but board members sometimes feel like because I give so much, now I need to be privileged over another board member who I am suspecting is not giving as much. So I think it's helpful when we're thinking about dashboards. You can say board member A, B, C. You can write out what people give. It's fine if you choose to do it that way, or you can just do median, or you can do so like, or average gifts received so far, outstanding gifts not received yet. And so that you're tracking these things in dashboards, but not in a transactional relationship. Like Jim and Sally haven't given yet, so tisk tisk. But just what are you compared to your goal? So we have just a couple. We have about 10 minutes left. So if you have any specific examples or things that you want to talk about, Gigi, we're going to get to your question next, but feel free to drop them into the Q&A. So Gigi asked about expanding boards during the pandemic. And I think there are probably some folks on this call that have engaged new board members. So I'd love to hear that from you all. I'm actually going to do a blog post about this. So if you don't follow me on LinkedIn and you've done this, you've engaged new board members, I'd love to highlight some examples of what it looks like to onboard folks during a pandemic. So people are definitely doing virtual recruiting for boards. And it's so linking it back to our conversation now, which is so critical for us to talk about what fundraising looks like in this moment in time for boards, even if it's going to be virtual. In some ways, this virtual environment makes it so much easier to be thinking about board retreats in some ways, board meetings. People could, if you have a business trip to Denver monthly and you can't ever make your board meeting, now you can, because now we're all here, we're all at home. Finding new networks is really something to think about. And what I'm encouraging people to do, in addition to thinking about what a board matrix is, there's plenty of examples on the internet, be thinking about what are the big challenges your organization is going to have in the coming year. Are you going to need somebody that has HR experience? Start prioritizing based on the big things that you're going to need specific expertise around, and then networking from there. And depending on your organization, some organizations do an update in a newsletter. Some organizations, I actually really love the idea of talking to your major donors about, we're looking for somebody that fits this profile. Do you know anybody that might be interested in joining the board? You don't necessarily want your major donors to do that, but they're really well connected and they can talk, and they're also going to know people that are going to be able to give meaningful gifts to the organization. So you can use it as a fundraising tool as well. As you think about this at the end of the year, you're engaging people more frequently by phone to talk to them about making a gift. Also, we're looking to bring new people on the board. Do you have any suggestions of people that we should talk to? So there are a couple ways, and Gigi, you're welcome to reach out to me, and I'm happy to connect you to some articles and things that I've been flagging for myself. Yeah.
And Nick is wondering if you have advice on getting the board to remember that in addition to business functions of running the organization, there also is the overall mission to focus on, and ways to get mission moments sort of into the board convenings.
Yeah, I have a client from a couple years ago that started, so a similar situation, and they started asking at the beginning, at the top of every meeting, for everyone to go around and share experience that they had with the organization in the last couple months. So something that they noticed, and that could have been a gift that they made, a connection that they made, a conversation that they had with the executive director, something that was happening more on the national environment that they thought that other board members should be aware of. And it became very clear, it took a while, right? It was like, okay, this is not so comfortable. But once it started, it really created some generative conversations about, oh, that's an interesting thing to flag, or, oh, thank you so much for doing that extra lift on the event, or whatever the thing was. And so it really became an appreciation and gratitude of the mission of the organization on the front end, so that the first thing that you're talking to your board members about is not approving last month's meeting minutes, right? It's easy to think about that as like, oh, that should be the first thing that we do, so we get it out of the way. But we get it out of the way, but then we sidetrack ourselves. So can we start front ending with a mission moment? Doesn't have to be every single board member saying something. You could have the board chair ask a couple people to sort of pre-populate so that it starts flowing easier. But doing that at the very beginning of a meeting rather than at the end when no one has time and people are starting to log off. Having major deja vu, everybody. I've definitely had a dream about having this conversation, but making sure that it's on the front end rather than on the back end.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. Some of my most meaningful moments as both staff member and now board member have been hearing other people talk about their connection to the mission and what's so meaningful, and knowing that they're also putting in that effort and to understand and embrace and share their own passion for what the organization is doing. So that's such a good way to start meetings.
The other thing of the digital environment, so I'm part of a giving circle, and we just did virtual site visits for the giving circle. And because we were able to do everything online, we were talking to this organization that serves low-income seniors here in the city. And one of them was able to join our call. And so she was able to join our call, talk to us about what the organization meant to her. What wonderful thing that was. So are there people that receive services from you, or if you're an arts organization, artists that you've worked with in the past that board members want to know what's going on? What is this environment looking like for them? Or teachers that you're working with, or people that are receiving services? Can you embed that in the beginning of each meeting? Because you can now, right? Because it's easy to call into a conversation. And I would do it at the beginning of the meeting, so then those people could be released rather than at the very end, and board members are busy and, again, unloading a dishwasher or whatever they might be doing while they're on the call.
Going back to board giving, Mark is wondering if we should spend time wealth screening board members.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, if you've got the resources to be doing wealth screenings anyways, as far as paid searches and things like that, absolutely, they should be in that search. You can also do, there's a lot of free resources and just research that you can be doing. And I would say make that a regular practice as potential board members come to the surface. Whatever part of that recruitment process is, I think it's okay to add wealth screen and or research in the vein of thinking about what cash resources perhaps could they bring, or the capacity that they're bringing with them to give to your organization.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that is helpful, I think, is having your board members pilot some of your different fundraising vehicles.
Yeah.
So, a board member that has been on the board for 6 years, what does a bequest look like? And can that person lead with a bequest and encourage their other fellow board members to join them in that bequest, or in having a bequest? Have an estate planner come to a board meeting to talk about bequests. And so people will be like, oh, I didn't even realize it. Charitable annuities. I'm walking in Tracy's shoes, and they don't fit. I have bigger feet, maybe, or smaller feet. So what are the different fundraising vehicles that board members might not be familiar with, that beyond just writing a check on a given, transfers of stock, et cetera, like this is where these board members can be having conversations and taking the lead on these things.
Yeah.
Maybe an example of how they convinced their employer to sponsor an event. What did that look like? Like, dig in a little bit. What did that look like, Jim? Like, how much information? Oh, it was a lot easier than I thought it was. All I had to do was fill out a one-page form, and we got a $5,000 grant. Fantastic. Okay.
That's so true. I mean, use them as, again, they should be your strategic help and sounding board. If you're the executive director, use their time and energy as such, help educate, but they're also, as like I said, playing kind of that both roles. I'm also looking for opportunities to be educated as someone who wants to participate in philanthropy to support organizations. As a board member, I'd love to learn more about that, and help educate my other board members that are my friends and my colleagues. So it's a good idea.
Yeah. Any final questions? I was going to just share a couple examples of things I've seen clients or conversations I've had of like interesting things people have done, particularly in a digital environment, to encourage board giving. But I want to make sure if there's any final questions, we address it before Tracy and I share a couple examples. And people might have to hop off at 11:30. We'll spend a couple more minutes because we started late, and I apologize again for the technology. Okay, so if there's no questions, a couple things that I want to just make sure I'm either reinforcing or sharing. Again, the digital environment is great. Like, have board members try to attend site visits. They get to know the organization, how the executive director talks about it in such a meaningful way. And I've been a grant officer at a foundation and a public agency, and it's so wonderful to hear from a board member's perspective. It really just gives a different lens for a conversation that been having with an executive director over the course of years. Just a new lens to it is really meaningful for me as a program officer past life. So encourage people, if they have the time and availability, to join for site visits with program officers and institutional funders. Thinking about, I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and she was like, my board chair decided this year she has a big blowout birthday dinner, 20 of her sorority sisters come together. And since they can't do that, she emailed them and said, okay, we would have eaten here, pick your meal, pick all your drinks, pick your tax and your tip, and give that donation that you would have made, or give that fee that you would have had at dinner as a donation to this organization. And don't be skimpy. You would have known that you would have had those 2 drinks and we would have shared that bottle of wine. So what would that look like? And then we can all get together and have a Zoom, and you can have your own cocktail, but make a donation in my honor rather than us getting together for dinner. I just thought that was so powerful. You're leveraging old friends to support a cause that you care about. Let's see, personalizing annual appeals. That's always, but like right now, people have a little bit, extra time is not really the right word, but people can receive, you can send these things to people in advance. They can write a note, they can write a sticky and send you all the stickies to put on your annual appeals so that it's a little bit more personal. Make sure to be asking board members to update their professional bios with the information about your organization that they serve on your board. And then I think about, how many times am I having conversations now that people are like, what have you been up to? And I'm like, I can't, nothing. I've been in my house for 8 months. I've been up to nothing. But what a missed opportunity. I'm not telling them about the giving circle that I founded. I'm not telling them about all the other things and causes I care about. Encourage your board members, give them the language so that they are equipped, that when people are asking, how are they doing? That they can pivot and they can talk about the great work that your organization is doing. And it's just on the tip of their tongue. So there are a couple of things.
Yeah.
Something that I'm thinking about, we talked about estate planners, but my husband and I updated our will recently, and like, can I get my friends together to learn more about how that works? And then within that, thinking about bequests and charitable things.
Those are good points. One of the things that I say this as a fundraising consultant a lot, fundraising is not a dirty secret or an ugly truth. It is this incredible opportunity for organizations. That's how our industry has come to be. It is this incredible way that we've developed as a society to take care of one another. We give money, we give time, we give connections. And I'm speaking as a board member, but also as a fundraising consultant to those other board members and or executive directors that are out there. At our very fabric, fundraising and raising resources to take care of one another and the ills of our society, or the needs that exist in our society, is something that to be celebrated and to be excited about. People give to people, and your board members should be, like Carlyn said, I truly believe should be some of the most passionate people, passionate about your work and about your vision and mission. And you educating one another and helping build that and like stoke the fire of that passion is really what stewardship and cultivation of board members is all about. And preparing them to be those ambassadors and to be talking about the great work of your organization. Educating about all the doors that people can come to your organization through, whether it's giving or service or volunteer or in kind, whatever that is. Like those are the vehicles or the doors that are opening. But really what's important is the passion that you're cultivating with your board members. So the best thing that board members can do is think beyond cash. Like, I have to give cash. It's resources. It's building passion and resources to help your mission go forward. So sometimes I have a slide in a lot of my presentations to board is like, fundraising doesn't have to be the F word. Like, we need to really think beyond just that burden that we feel of cash. It's absolutely stoking passion to raise resources for amazing organizations and missions in this world. So
Yeah, yeah. And just to underscore that, Tracy, is that doesn't come naturally.
true.
That comes with work that you need to do for the board to equip them with the language to talk passionately about your organization. And so for some executive directors and development staff, you need to sort of rethink how are you giving them that information so that they can be absorbing and repeating it. And you have to be able to say it out loud. They have to be able to practice making mistakes with one another. They have to create a safe space so that they feel comfortable talking about the organization when they might feel a little bit nervous talking about the organization. And so if you're not creating space for them to do that, either at board meetings, trainings, things like that, that people need to get together in order to become effective advocates, they don't wake up effective advocates. You need to be priming them with the information you want them to be sharing with the world, because you're going to know that information the best.
Yeah.
And that then they become ambassadors and advocates. It does not happen overnight. It does not happen when they just join the board and now like they're ready to roll.
Right.
They're afraid. They're worried about not representing your organization correctly, and they need help. So there's some, so be thinking about ways that you can be priming them for that.
Yeah. That absolutely bolsters the culture of philanthropy within your organization. It's not, fundraising is not magic. It is hard. It's hard work and it's systematic, but it takes time. And I think the way that you approach it builds that culture of philanthropy and actually does more for raising resources as you approach it systematically with intention.
Yeah. And then just to just bring it all together, there's money out there.
Mhm.
People want to give. They're going to give money to something. They might as well give it to you. And so think about how your board can help make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Tracy, what does it look like to work with Thread if you like, if people are like, I need more from Tracy, what does it look like?
Our work is really what we say is we hope to build successful development departments in organizations that are small to medium size and even large, but the majority of our work is really with the smaller guys. So we are all about assessment. Where are you right now? What does fundraising look like and revenue look like in your organization? And then how do we implement strategies that are realistic, rooted in reality for your organization and what the capacity that you have? And what does that look like now and maybe in 2 to 3 years? So we create development plans. We work with development teams to help them be really specific. So I would say we accomplish all the fundraising work kind of soup to nuts. We're also fundraisers. So if you have a need for assessment and strategy and some frontline fundraising help, we can come in and support grant writing and appeal writing as we partner with organizations. But what we really hope to accomplish as Thread is that when our partnership is over, that the organizations have grown a capacity to take and really fly on their own, to use those strategies to raise the money that they need to carry out their mission. We have loved working with all of our partners and just love to see the capacity built for successful fundraising over time.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And so I've had a number of clients. We've had a number of shared clients over the years. It's been great and definitely have a lot of impact. And then on my side, I do board trainings and all sorts of board work, and then also do leadership transitions. So if you're an organization that's going to have a senior leader and you're wondering, how are you going to recruit that person? That's the work that I do. So would love to connect with people on LinkedIn. If you sent me a private message, I apologize, since I've been leading this, I can't read them. But if you want to send that to me by email, I'm going to drop my email into the chat here. And Tracy, feel free to do the same. And if you ever want to talk about these things just offline as a sounding board, happy to be one. Kara, I sent that to you privately. Not doing well, guys. Is Mercury in retrograde yet? Does anybody know? I think it might be. Okay, well, thanks so much for the great conversations today. We're going to follow up with a couple of resources you all might find helpful. And of course, keep our conversation going.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much for the time, Tracy.
Yeah, take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Tara, you and I can stay on for a second here.